Hello ladies and gentlemen, in this video we are going to see about the impacts of inflation. So what are all the impacts of inflation on a economy, on a people and on a government? So that is what we are going to discuss now. So first one is the inflation helps the businessman but affects the employee or wage earner. Okay, take for example, if some big corporate company was involved in producing a shoe, so the cost of the production was consider some 800. This is just an example. Take for example, the cost of a production of a shoe is 800, and it sells the shoe in a market at 1000 rupees. So this is what regularly happening. Consider it as a regular happening one. But what happens whenever the inflation is what happens when there is a inflation is that the price will increase. So it increased to some 1200. It increased to some 1200. So usually the businessman gets a profit on selling the shoe is 200. But during inflation, he gets a profit of 400. So this is the inflation due to demand. Inflation due to demand or demand pull inflation. So this is the example for demand pull inflation that we see in the last video, not a cost push inflation. Whenever there is an increase in the demand for a shoe in the market, when number of people needs a shoe in a market or the demand of a shoe was increased in a market by a people is that whenever the demand is increased, the businessman will raise the price of a product from 1000 to 1200, but the cost of a production was same. So this is what happened. A businessman able to get a huge profit during a demand of a product was increased, but an employee gets a regular salary. When the production is 800 and the production remaining same, whenever the inflation happens also during a demandful inflation, employee gets the same salary even after the increase of a price to 1200. Whenever the price is 1000, he gets the same salary. Whenever the price is 1200, he gets the same salary. So what happens is that a businessman gets a huge profit, but employee cannot able to get an increase in a salary, increase in a wages. So he was one of those who is going to affect it. How is that? If an employee need a shoe, he goes to market and need to buy a shoe for 1200 after inflation, but his salary was same. So this is what the businessman will get a huge profit and the employee will get affected. Next one is that increased imports, reduced exports. So this is the example for a cost push inflation. This is the example for a demand pull inflation. This is the example for a cost push inflation. Increased imports and reduced exports. So due to the cost push inflation, what happens is that production will get affected. Because the raw material, the price of the raw material, the price of other materials that was used for a production of something, some product was increased. So what happened is that the production or producer of a product will get affected. You cannot able to buy the raw materials easily because the price of raw material was increased. So whenever the production was stopped, what happens is that there will be a less availability of that particular product in the market, which causes people to import or businesses to import a product from other country. Import is nothing but getting a product from other country. So what happens if there is an import is that businessmen of Indian businessman need to pay a money to foreign country because he is importing a product from a foreign country. So if they need to pay a money to a foreign country, so our money goes to another country. So this is what the impact of import, and the export will get reduced export. Why reduced export is that the production was already affected, the scarcity was remain in our country itself. We cannot able to export the product because the demand here also is high, so there will be no lift to export. So what happened when the export was affected is that whenever the export is happening, foreign businessman paying money to India, so our money receiving capacity will be reduced. We cannot able to receive a money from a foreign country. So this is what happens: increased imports and reduced exports. Recession in some sectors. So as already said in the previous videos, what is meant by recession is that reduced GDP growth, reduced GDP growth, gross domestic product growth. So gross domestic product is a total value of all the products that was produced in the country. So whenever the GDP get affected, there will be a less growth in the economy because business activities was reduced. Whenever the production was reduced, whenever the GDP was reduced, business activity was reduced, so less growth will be there. Distortion in the production patterns. So we already see that due to the inflation, production will get affected, raw material cost will become high, wages will become high due to the cost push inflation, which affects the production pattern in a company. Depreciation of rupee. So what is meant by depreciation of a rupee is that our money value of a rupee when compared to other currencies, usually it will be a dollar. So what happened during inflation is that export is reduced, import is increased. Export was reduced. So what happened during the import is that our businessman or our country or our bank must need to pay a foreign businessman, foreign country in a US dollar. Usually it will be a US dollar. So the demand of the US dollar will get increased. So when there is a increase in the import of a product from other country, we need to pay a money in a US dollar. Usually it was a US dollar. So the demand for a US dollar will get increased. So whenever there is an increase in the US dollar, demand for a US dollar, what happens is that our rupee value get affected. Why? Because the exports was reduced. Whenever the export was reduced, what happened is that our money receiving capacity, we cannot able to receive money from other countries. Usually they pay in dollars. So demand for a dollar will again become high. So what happens? Demand for a dollar becomes high is that demand for a rupee will get reduced because we are not exporting the product. We are increasingly importing the product, so only the demand for a US dollar is increased. When there is an increase in the demand for a particular US dollar, we need to pay a extra money. Take for example, if it was usually some 75 rupees we are paying to get a $1, what happens whenever there is increase in the demand is that we need to pay some 80, 80 to 85, it may be anything, depends upon the demand of a US dollar. So whenever the demand of a particular currency goes high, our money, which is nothing but a rupee, value of a rupee will get reduced. So this is what happened in the during the inflation. So depreciation of a rupee, reduced savings. So during inflation, price of a products will get increased during the inflation. So usually people, if someone getting a salary of some 20,000 rupees per month, he is buying some products for some 15,000 for survival. It may be a food, it may be a petrol, it may be a some other items. Remaining 5,000 he was saving in a bank. But what happens when there is an increase, when there is an increase in the prices or inflation, is that the price of a products usually he was buying from a market will get increased. So he was spending all the 20,000. He does not able to save a money in a bank. So saving was affected. So corruption activity. So corruption activity, how the corruption activity will occur is that we can compare it to the first example. The businessman getting a huge profit during a inflation. From a during inflation, he was getting a extra profit, extra money. So there is a chances that he may hide that extra money. He does not pay a tax on that extra money during a inflation, which leads to a black money and other corruption activities. A lack of a credit availability. During inflation, what happen is that our government will increase the, or our bank will increase the interest rate. Central bank or the other banks will increase the interest rate. Why the interest rate was increased is that to reduce the money availability in the market. Whenever the money availability in the market was reduced, people does not have money to buy a product. So whenever they cannot be able to buy a product, the demand for a product will get reduced. So whenever the demand was reduced, the prices of the product was also reduced. To reduce the demand in the market, government will increase the interest rate, or a central bank will increase the interest rate. So whenever the interest rate was increased, people usually does not come to bank to get a loan, because they need to pay a high interest for a money they are getting as a loan. So the money availability with the people was reduced, thereby the demand for a products will get reduced. So usually this was happened during a inflation. So this leads to a lack of a credit availability. What happens during the increase in the interest rate is that the businesses and the companies which depends upon the credit for the business activity cannot easily able to get a loan, because interest rate was very high. They may not able to pay the interest. So the credit availability will get affected. The business will get affected due to the inflation. So these are all the major impacts of inflation in a economy. Thank you.